Did you know that you are much more than just you alone? You think of yourself as an individual, but are you really? It may be difficult to believe, but what each of us thinks of as our individual self may in truth be a community. Let me assure you right now that this video will only cover biology that is agreed upon by all biologists. Everything that will be said in the next few minutes can be found in textbooks. Only later will the deep truth be revealed. Let us begin by looking at a human cell. There are roughly 30 trillion cells in an adult human, and although they look different depending on whether they are liver cells, muscle cells, or brain cells, they have many things in common, and this illustration shows an average cell. In the middle of this average cell is the nucleus where the DNA resides, and floating in the cytoplasm around it are one or more mitochondria. The mitochondria produce energy for the cell, but what is truly interesting about them is that they look remarkably like bacteria. In fact, they have their own DNA that is completely separate from the DNA in the nucleus. And it turns out that not only do the mitochondria look like bacteria, but the DNA that they contain is very similar to the DNA found in a type of bacteria known as Rickettsia. It is now believed that approximately 2 billion years ago, two simple organisms came together in what was most likely one of the organisms trying to attack the other for food. However, something went wrong. Or perhaps we should say that something went right, because the two organisms merged into a single new organism that was more fit than the two alone. This new organism was what was known as a composite organism, which is a living being made from two or more separate organisms. All animals today contain the descendants of this first union. Each cell of every animal, excluding blood cells, is a composite organism. It is made from the larger original bacterium and one or more smaller bacteria, which are now called mitochondria. The legacy of these bacteria coming together to make a more complex group organism can be seen every time an animal cell reproduces, and this includes humans. The main part of the cell has DNA located in the nucleus, and the mitochondria have their own separate DNA. These separate DNA strands reproduce separately, but in a synchronized manner. When you speak to people, you refer to yourself as I, and this is a perfectly valid thing to do. But it would also be accurate to refer to yourself as we, because in one sense you are an individual, but in another sense you are a community of bacteria working together to make something larger and better than each one of them. This process of different organisms joining together to make a larger and better organism has occurred numerous times in the history of life on Earth. For instance, plants and animals each became composite organisms in completely separate events. Plants, unlike animals, do not have mitochondria to produce chemical energy, but they do have similar structures in their cells known as chloroplasts that also produce chemical energy. Just as with mitochondria in animals, chloroplasts in animals are actually separate organisms that were engulfed over 1 billion years ago, when a cell that would later become the ancestor of plant cells consumed a cyanobacterium, and instead of digesting it, joined with it in a symbiotic relationship, and the new creature was greater than the sum of the two individuals. Another example of composite organisms that occur on a regular basis are lichens. These organisms are not plants, but are a fusion of a fungus and either algae or cyanobacteria. Lichens have properties that are different from the fungus, the algae, and the cyanobacteria that make it up. And in addition, they can live in areas where none of their constituent organisms could survive. Lichens are indeed successful. It is estimated that 6% of the Earth's land surface is covered with lichens, and they can be found in the most extreme environments from Arctic tundra to hot, dry deserts. They can even grow in solid rock between the mineral grains. Lichens have been shown to be able to grow in the conditions found on Mars, and in 2005, lichens were launched on a Russian Soyuz rocket and exposed to the full vacuum and radiation of space for 15 days. When the lichens were returned to Earth, they were found to be completely healthy. The successes of plants, animals, and lichens, which are all composite organisms, show us that the joining together of simpler organisms into a greater group is a good survival strategy. We should expect to see other composite organisms in unexpected places, which takes us closer to the deep truth. It seems that the joining together of simpler organisms into more complex composite organisms is an archetype that will be repeated over and over again. The fractal geometry of nature also hints that the process may occur at many different scales. We can expect to see composite organisms from the cellular level and at larger scales such as with lichens, and even up to larger scales than that. Are you beginning to see the outline of the deep truth? Can you guess where this series of videos is going? If you have not yet watched the previous 3 parts, then you might want to. And if you want to hear more about the deep truth, then please join us for further videos in this series. Finally, as a human, you are a composite creature, and this is one of the many reasons not to get too attached to the idea that you are an individual alone in the world. There are more reasons, many more reasons, and in future videos we will learn why each person can call themselves we instead of I. This knowledge will probably challenge you, but that is what you can expect from the words of Cheresie.